Ethan Bennett stood on the porch of his modest two-story home in Cannon Beach, Oregon, the salty breeze from the Pacific Ocean carrying the faint sound of waves crashing against Haystack Rock just a mile away. It was a crisp September afternoon. In 2024, the kind of day where the sky was a deep blue and seagulls circled overhead. Ethan, a 42-year-old carpenter with dark brown hair and weary gray eyes, adjusted his flannel shirt as he waited for his wife Lauren to return from what she'd called a quick errand. Their son Caleb, a lanky 13-year-old with his father's gray eyes and a mop of curly brown hair, was inside playing video games, the hum of the TV faintly audible through the open window. Ethan had sensed something off for months. Lauren's late nights at the boutique she managed, her sudden interest in yoga classes, the way she'd lock her phone whenever he walked into the room. But he'd chalked it up to stress, hoping it was just a phase. He was wrong. A shiny silver Jeep pulled into the driveway, and Lauren stepped out, her long chestnut hair cascading. Over a leather jacket she hadn't worn since their early dating days, her hazel eyes glinting with a cold confidence. But what stopped Ethan's heart wasn't her. It was the man stepping out of the driver's side. Derek, a broad-shouldered 38-year-old with slick black hair and a gym-toned physique, wearing a designer polo shirt, his arm casually draped around two boys, twins around 10 years old with matching buzz cuts. Lauren didn't hesitate. She strode up the walkway, her boots clicking against the concrete, and said, "Ethan, this is Derek, and these are his sons, Tyler and Ryan. They're moving in for a while. It's time we stopped living a lie." Her voice was sharp, like she'd rehearsed it. Ethan's laugh was bitter, a raw sound that tore from his chest. "Living a lie? What the hell are you talking about?" Lauren brushed past him into the house, Derek following with a smug nod, the twins trailing behind with backpacks slung over their shoulders. Caleb appeared at the door, his game controller still in hand, his eyes wide with confusion. "Dad, who are they?" he asked, his voice small. Lauren turned, her smile cruel. "They're our new family, Caleb. Derek's the one who makes me feel alive, not your dad." Ethan's world tilted, the words slicing through him like a jagged blade. He'd missed the signs, her new perfume, the way she'd hum while texting late at night, the yoga retreats she'd come back from glowing. But this was beyond anything he'd imagined. Lauren had brought another man and his children into their home to end their 15-year marriage, right in front of their son. Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his voice low and trembling. "You don't get to do this. Not like this. Not in front of Caleb." Lauren rolled her eyes, tossing her jacket on the couch. "Oh, spare me the drama, Ethan. You've been a ghost in this marriage for years. Boring, predictable, always working in that damn workshop while I withered." Derek finally spoke, his voice smooth like he was selling a car. "Look, man, it's not personal. Lauren deserves happiness." Ethan turned to him, his gray eyes burning. "Happiness? You walk into my house with your kids like you own it, and you call that happiness?" Caleb's voice broke through, small but fierce. "Mom, why are you doing this?" Lauren's gaze flicked to her son, dismissive. "Because I'm done pretending, Caleb. Your dad's not enough for me anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him, his marriage crumbling in real time as Caleb's eyes filled with hurt. The ocean breeze suddenly felt colder, the seagulls' cries sharper, and Ethan knew this was only the beginning of a storm he hadn't seen coming. Inside the cozy living room of the Cannon Beach home, the late afternoon light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft shadows on the hardwood floor. The faint scent of cedar from Ethan's workshop in the garage lingered in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of Lauren's new lavender perfume. Ethan stood frozen near the doorway, his flannel shirt clinging to his sweat-dampened back, his gray eyes blazing with a mix of disbelief and rage. Lauren had just dropped a bomb. She'd declared their 15-year marriage over, introducing Derek and his twin sons as their new family, her words still echoing in Ethan's mind like a cruel taunt. Derek lounged on the couch like he'd lived there for years, his designer polo shirt stretched across his gym-toned frame, one arm resting casually on the backrest, his black hair gleaming under the lamplight. The twins, Tyler and Ryan, rummaged through Caleb's snack drawer in the kitchen, their voices loud and carefree as they argued over a bag of chips. Caleb stood beside Ethan, his curly brown hair falling into his eyes, his small hands gripping the game controller so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lauren tossed her chestnut hair back, her hazel eyes cold as she smirked at Ethan. "You heard me, Ethan. I'm done with this charade. Derek's the one who makes me feel like a woman, not you with your sawdust and late nights." Her words were venom, each one a dagger aimed at Ethan's heart. He'd missed the signs. Her new perfume. The yoga classes she'd started taking 3 times a week. The way she'd laugh at her phone during dinner. But now they crashed into him like a tidal wave. Ethan's voice trembled with fury. "You think you can just waltz in? Here with your boyfriend and his kids and rewrite our lives? In front of our son?" Lauren scoffed, kicking off her boots and flopping onto the armchair. "Don't act so high and mighty, Ethan. You've been checked out for years, always in that garage, never here for me emotionally." Derek chimed in, his tone slick. "She's right, man. Lauren needs a real man, someone who sees her." Ethan's fists clenched, his nails digging into his palms. "A real man doesn't break a family apart, you coward." The room grew. Tense, the sound of the twins' laughter in the kitchen, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the living room. Caleb's voice broke the silence, small but fierce. "Mom, you're a liar." Lauren's head snapped toward her son, her smirk fading. "Excuse me?" Caleb stepped forward, his gray eyes burning with a strength Ethan had never seen in him before. "I saw your texts. I found your phone last week when you left it on the counter. You told Derek you couldn't wait to leave us, that I was a burden because I look like Dad." The words hung heavy, a raw truth that stripped Lauren bare. Her face paled, then flushed with anger. "You little sneak, you had no right to go through my phone," she snapped, standing up. Ethan stepped between them, his voice low and dangerous. "He had every right. You're the one who brought this mess into our home. And now you're blaming our son for your betrayal?" Lauren's hazel eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't turn this on me, Ethan. I deserve to be happy. And Derek gives me that. Maybe his boys will toughen Caleb up. He's too soft, just like you." That was the final straw. Ethan's vision blurred with rage. But before he could speak, Caleb shouted, "You're not my mum anymore. I don't want you here." His voice cracked, but the conviction in it was unshakable. Lauren froze, her expression a mix of shock and fury. Derek shifted uncomfortably on the couch, his confidence faltering. Ethan looked at his son, pride swelling in his chest despite the pain. Caleb's words had cut deeper than any argument Ethan could have made. The room fell silent, the only sound the distant crash of waves outside. Ethan knew this moment would change everything. It was the first crack in Lauren's facade, and he wouldn't let her forget it. Ethan retreated to his workshop in the garage of their Cannon Beach home. The scent of sawdust and varnish, a familiar comfort amidst the chaos that had erupted in the living room just moments ago. The late September light filtered through a small window, casting a golden glow on the workbench littered with tools, half-finished birdhouses and a stack of cedar planks. Ethan's dark brown hair was disheveled, his gray eyes stormy with a mix of betrayal and determination, his flannel shirt sleeves rolled up as he paced the cramped space. Lauren's words, "Derek's the one who makes me feel like a woman," echoed in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. He'd been a fool to ignore the signs, the yoga retreats, the late-night texts, the way she'd pull away when he tried to hold her. But he wasn't blind anymore. Caleb's revelation about Lauren's texts had lit a fire in him, and Ethan knew he had to act. He opened a locked drawer in his workbench, pulling out a thick manila envelope he'd been filling for the past 4 months. Inside were the pieces of Lauren's betrayal, screenshots of flirty messages with Derek, a receipt from a boutique hotel in Portland where she'd stayed during a supposed work conference, credit card statements showing charges for lingerie he'd never seen, and even a printed email from Derek to one of Lauren's co-workers, bragging about how he'd won her over from her pathetic carpenter husband. Ethan's hands shook as he flipped through the evidence, each item a nail in the coffin of their 15-year marriage. He walked back into the living room, the envelope heavy in his grip. Lauren was sipping a glass of wine she'd poured herself, her chestnut hair catching the lamplight. Her hazel eyes narrowed as she laughed at something Derek said. Derek was still sprawled on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, while Tyler and Ryan played a board game on the coffee table, their laughter grating on Ethan's nerves. Caleb sat on the stairs, his curly brown hair hiding his face, his shoulders hunched with the weight of his mother's betrayal. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "Lauren, I've got something you need to see." She rolled her eyes, setting the wineglass down with a clink. "What now, Ethan? More of your whining?" He tossed the envelope onto the coffee table, the contents spilling out, photos, receipts, messages, scattering across the surface like a confession in black and white. Lauren's smirk vanished, her face paling as she snatched up a screenshot of her text to Derek. "You've been spying on me," she hissed, her voice sharp with indignation. Ethan stood his ground, his grey eyes cold. "No, I've been gathering proof that you've been lying to me, to Caleb, to everyone, and now I've got enough to make sure you leave this marriage with nothing but your gym rat and his noisy kids." Derek stood up, his confidence wavering. "Hey man, let's not make this messy. Maybe we can talk this out." Ethan turned to him, his voice a low growl. "So you don't get to talk. You walked into my home, sat on my couch, let your kids play with my son's things like you belong here. You made this messy." Lauren threw the papers down, her hazel eyes flashing with fury. "You think you can threaten me, Ethan? I've been miserable for years because of you, always working, never listening, never seeing me." Ethan stepped closer, his voice cutting. "You weren't miserable, Lauren. You were selfish. You chose to cheat, to lie, to hurt our son. And now you're going to face the consequences." Caleb looked up from the stairs, his grey eyes filled with a quiet strength. "Dad's right, Mom, you broke everything." Lauren spun toward her son, her face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare take his side, Caleb. You don't understand what I've been through." But Ethan cut her off, his voice booming. "Get out. Take your boyfriend and his kids and get out of my house. Now?" The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Lauren grabbed her wineglass, downed the last of it, and stormed toward the door, Derek and the twins scrambling to follow. As the door slammed shut, Ethan sank onto the couch, the envelope still open on the table, his hands trembling, but a fierce resolve settled in his chest. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for Caleb, and he wouldn't stop until Lauren paid for what she'd done. The kitchen of the Cannon Beach home was bathed in the soft glow of the overhead light, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the only sound breaking the heavy silence that had settled after Lauren, Derek, and the twins stormed out. Ethan stood at the counter, his dark brown hair still tousled from the confrontation, his grey eyes hollow with exhaustion, a glass of water in his hand, trembling slightly as he tried to process the whirlwind of betrayal that had just torn through his life. The scent of Lauren's lavender perfume still lingered, a bitter reminder of her presence. Caleb sat at the small wooden table, his curly brown hair pushed back, his face pale but his grey eyes steady, a plate of untouched peanut butter sandwiches in front of him, the same sandwiches Ethan had made for him every Saturday since he was 5. Ethan sat, the glass down, his voice soft but firm. "I'm so sorry. Caleb, you didn't deserve to see that, to hear those things." Caleb looked up, his expression a mix of hurt and resolve. "It's not your fault, Dad. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't think she'd do this." Ethan pulled out a chair and sat across from his son, reaching over to squeeze his shoulder. "We're going to get through this, I promise." The moment of quiet connection was shattered by the buzz of Ethan's phone on the counter, a text from Lauren, the words stark and venomous on the screen. "You'll regret this, Ethan. I'm calling my lawyer, and I'll make sure you lose everything, including Caleb." Ethan's jaw tightened, the threat igniting a fire in his chest. He showed the message to Caleb, who read it and whispered, "She's lying again. She doesn't care about me." The words broke Ethan's heart, but they also steeled his resolve. He wouldn't let Lauren twist the narrative, not after what she'd done. 2 days later, the morning fog rolled in thick over Cannon Beach, cloaking the town in a grey haze. Ethan stood on the porch, a cup of black coffee in hand, watching as a police cruiser pulled into the driveway. Lauren stepped out of a rental car behind it, her chestnut hair pulled into a tight bun, her hazel eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, dressed in a sleek black coat that screamed defiance. 2 officers approached. One of them, a stocky man with a buzz cut, spoke first. "Mr. Bennett? We're here to escort Ms. Harper while she retrieves her belongings." Ethan nodded, his voice calm but cold. "Go ahead, but make it quick. I don't want her here longer than necessary." Lauren smirked as she brushed past him, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She moved through the house with a deliberate slowness, grabbing clothes, jewelry, and a few books from the shelf. her movements calculated to provoke as she packed a suitcase in the bedroom. Ethan stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching her. One of the officers lingered nearby, his expression neutral. Lauren's voice carried from the room, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "This place reeks of failure. I can't believe I stayed. So long." The words were meant to sting, and they did. But Ethan refused to let her see it. She emerged with 2 suitcases, pausing to glance at a framed photo on the wall, a picture of the 3 of them at Cannon Beach's annual sandcastle festival. Caleb with a plastic shovel, Lauren laughing, Ethan holding them both. Her hazel eyes lingered on it for a moment, then turned away, her face unreadable. Caleb appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching a small wooden box Ethan had carved for him years ago. He walked down, his grey eyes steady, and handed the box to Lauren. "Here," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's the shell necklace you made me when I was 6. Keep it, so you don't forget what you threw away." Lauren's hand hesitated as she took the box, her expression flickering with something. Regret. Maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She shoved the box into her bag. "You'll see I'm right, Caleb. You'll want me back one day," she said, her voice sharp, then turned to the officers. "Let's go." They left without another word. The cruiser pulling away into the fog, Ethan and Caleb stood in the doorway, the weight of the moment settling over them like the mist outside. Ethan pulled his son into a tight hug, whispering, "We don't need her. We've got each other." Caleb nodded against his chest, and as the fog thickened, Ethan felt a quiet strength take root. He'd protect Caleb, no matter what Lauren threw at them next. Caleb's bedroom in the Cannon Beach home was a small sanctuary of teenage chaos. Posters of surfers riding massive waves plastered on the walls, a desk cluttered with schoolbooks, a cracked skateboard propped in the corner, and a string of fairy lights casting a warm glow over the space. It was late September, just days after Lauren had taken her belongings and left with the police escort. Ethan sat on the edge of Caleb's bed, his dark brown hair pushed back, his grey eyes heavy with the weight of the past week, his flannel shirt wrinkled from a sleepless night. Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, his curly brown hair falling into his eyes, sorting through a box of old keepsakes, baseball cards, a faded friendship bracelet, a small wooden whale Ethan had carved for him during a father-son camping trip to Ecola State Park. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable, a shared understanding of the storm they'd just weathered. Caleb pulled out a photo. From the box, a snapshot of him and Lauren at the Cannon Beach Kite Festival 2 years ago. His smile wide as he held a bright red kite, Lauren's chestnut hair blowing in the wind as she laughed beside him. Caleb stared at the photo for a long moment, then set it aside, his grey eyes distant. "I thought she'd fight harder to stay," he said quietly, his voice tinged with a mix of disappointment and relief. Ethan's chest tightened. He reached over and placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "She made her choice, Caleb. It's not about you, it's about her." Caleb nodded, but the hurt lingered in his expression. Ethan knew he had to act, to protect his son from Lauren's chaos. He stood up, pulling his phone from his pocket. "I'm going to file for divorce. Today I've got all the evidence, and I'm not letting her drag this out." Caleb looked up, his grey eyes steady. "Good. She doesn't get to come back after what she did." Ethan drove to the office of his lawyer, a small firm in nearby Seaside, the coastal highway winding past rugged cliffs and crashing waves. The envelope of evidence, texts, receipts, emails, sat on the passenger seat, a silent testament to Lauren's betrayal. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Marissa, flipped through the documents with a practiced efficiency, her expression unreadable. "You've got a strong case." "Ethan," she said, setting the papers down, "with this, we can push for full custody of Caleb and make sure Lauren doesn't walk away with anything she doesn't deserve." Ethan nodded, his voice firm. "I want this done clean and fast. I don't want her anywhere near Caleb unless he's ready." Marissa assured him she'd have the papers served to Lauren at Derek's new condo in Astoria. A deliberate move to catch her off guard in her new life. Ethan left the office with a sense of purpose, but the weight of the decision pressed on him. He decided to take Caleb to their favorite spot, a quiet stretch of beach near Indian Beach. The late afternoon sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The waves roared as they crashed against the shore. Caleb skipped rocks across the water, his curly brown hair catching the golden light. Ethan sat on a piece of driftwood watching his son. "Do you think she ever loved us?" Caleb asked suddenly, his voice small against the sound of the surf. Ethan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I think she loved the idea of us, but somewhere along the way, she stopped loving who we really are." Caleb nodded, tossing another rock into the waves. "I don't miss her, I miss who I thought she was." The honesty in his words struck Ethan like a wave. He stood and walked over to Caleb, placing a hand on his back. "We're enough, you and me. We'll build something better." That evening, as they drove home, Ethan's phone buzzed. With a notification, a delivery confirmation from the lawyer. The divorce papers had been served. Lauren had received them at Derek's condo, right in the middle of her new fairy tale. Ethan imagined her face, the shock, the anger, and a small, cold satisfaction settled in his chest. He glanced at Caleb in the passenger seat, who was staring. Out the window, a faint smile on his lips. For the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. They were taking back their lives, one step at a time. The back porch of the Cannon Beach home overlooked a small backyard where a weathered wooden swing hung from an old oak tree. The late October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant tang of the ocean. Ethan stood leaning against the railing, his dark brown hair ruffled by the breeze, his grey eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, casting a fiery orange glow across the sky. His flannel shirt was unbuttoned over a plain tee, a rare moment of stillness after weeks of turmoil. Caleb sat on the swing, his curly brown hair catching the fading light, pushing himself gently with one foot, a sketchbook balanced on his lap, the pencil in his hand sketching the jagged outline of Haystack Rock. It had been a month since Ethan filed for divorce. The papers served to Lauren at Derek's condo in Astoria, but the calm that followed was deceptive. A storm brewing just beneath the surface. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from an unknown number. "You're a monster, Ethan. You're turning Caleb against me. I'll make you pay." The words were unmistakably Lauren's. Her venom seeping through the screen, Ethan's jaw clenched. He'd expected her to lash out, but this felt different, more desperate, more dangerous. He showed the message to Caleb, who glanced at it and shrugged, his grey eyes steady. She's just mad because she's losing. But Ethan wasn't so sure. Lauren had always been calculating, and he knew she wouldn't let go without a fight. 2 days later, Ethan received a call from Caleb's school, the principal's voice tight with concern. "Mr. Bennett, there was an incident today. Lauren showed up during lunch. She tried to take Caleb with her, said she just wanted to talk, but he refused. She got agitated, and a teacher had to intervene." Ethan's blood ran cold. Lauren had violated the temporary custody agreement, no contact without supervision, and she'd scared Caleb in the process. He drove to the school in a fury, the coastal highway blurring past as his hands gripped the steering wheel. When he arrived, Caleb was waiting in the principal's office, his sketchbook clutched to his chest, his face pale but his grey eyes defiant. "She wouldn't leave, Dad. She kept saying I had to go with her, that you were poisoning me against her." Caleb's voice trembled, but he didn't cry. Ethan pulled him into a quick hug, then turned to the principal. "I want this documented. I'm filing a violation report." The principal nodded, handing over a written statement and security footage of the incident. That evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his lawyer Marissa on speakerphone. The evidence from the school spread out before him. Marissa's voice was calm but firm. "This is a clear violation, Ethan. We can use this to restrict her access even further. Possibly suspend her visitation rights until a court hearing," Ethan agreed, his voice hard. "Do it. I won't let her near Caleb until she proves she's not a threat." But Lauren wasn't done. Late that night, Ethan's phone lit up with another message from her. "You'll regret keeping my son from me. I'll tell the court you're abusive, that you're unfit. Caleb will hate you for this." The words were a dagger, twisting in Ethan's gut, but he didn't respond, instead forwarding the message to Marissa as more evidence of Lauren's harassment. The next day, Lauren appeared at the house unannounced, her chestnut hair loose and wild, her hazel eyes blazing with a frantic energy. She pounded on the door, her voice shrill. "Ethan, let me in. I need to see Caleb. You can't do this to me. Ethan opened the door, but stood firm in the doorway, his grey eyes cold. You violated the agreement, Lauren. You scared Caleb at school. You don't get to waltz back in here like nothing happened. Lauren's face twisted with rage. You're turning him against me. He's my son. I have rights. Ethan's voice was low. Cutting? You lost those rights when you tried to force him to leave with you. When you chose Derek over us, you don't get to play the victim now. Lauren stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I made a mistake with Derek. Okay, he's gone. I kicked him out. We can fix this for Caleb. Ethan stared at her, seeing the desperation in her eyes, but he felt nothing. No pity, no longing, only resolve. He shook his head. You don't get to fix this. You broke it. And I'm done cleaning up your messes. He stepped back and closed the door, the lock clicking into place through the window. He saw Lauren stand there for a moment, her shoulders shaking, before she turned and stumbled back to her car. Ethan leaned against the door, his heart pounding, but a fierce determination burned in his chest. He'd protect Caleb no matter how hard Lauren fought, and he'd never let her hurt his son again. The living room of the Cannon Beach home glowed with the soft morning light, filtering through the sheer curtains. The faint scent of cedar from Ethan's workshop, drifting in as the November air carried a chill through the slightly open window. Ethan stood in front of the mirror on the wall, adjusting a navy tie he hadn't worn since his brother's wedding years ago, his dark brown hair neatly combed, his grey eyes sharp with a mix of nerves and determination, his flannel shirt swapped for a crisp white button-down. Today was the court hearing for the divorce and custody of Caleb, and Ethan was ready to fight. Caleb was at Ethan's sister's house in Seaside, playing board games with his cousins, a deliberate choice to keep him far from the legal battle about to unfold. Ethan glanced at a photo on the mantel, a picture of him, Caleb, and Lauren on a whale-watching trip off Depot Bay, the three of them bundled in raincoats, laughing as a grey whale breached the surface. The memory felt like a lifetime ago. Now, replaced by the bitter reality of Lauren's betrayal, Ethan grabbed his coat and the thick manila envelope of evidence, texts, receipts, emails, the school incident report, and headed to the courthouse in Astoria. The drive along the coastal highway was quiet, the ocean a steely grey under a cloudy sky. His lawyer Marissa met him outside the courthouse, her sharp eyes scanning the parking lot. She'll play the victim card. Tears. Excuses, the works, Marissa warned, her voice steady. But we've got the truth on our side. Let the evidence speak. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. I just want this over, for Caleb's sake. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy. With tension, Lauren sat across the room, her chestnut hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, her hazel eyes framed by subtle makeup, dressed in a pale blue blouse that screamed innocence, a stark contrast to the woman who'd brought Derek into their home. She avoided Ethan's gaze, her lawyer whispering in her ear. The hearing began with introductions. Then Lauren's lawyer stood painting a twisted picture of their marriage. Ms. Harper endured years of emotional neglect, her attempts to save the relationship ignored. Her one mistake with another man was a cry for help. And now Mr. Bennett is unjustly keeping her son from her. The words were a punch to Ethan's gut, but he kept his composure. Marissa stood next, her voice calm but commanding. The evidence tells a different story. She presented the folder, every text, every receipt, the school incident where Lauren violated the custody agreement, a recorded call where Caleb begged Lauren to stop, yelling at him during a supervised visit. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, reviewed the documents in silence, her expression unreadable. Lauren took the stand, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. I just want my family back. I was lost, I made a mistake, but Ethan pushed me away. He never cared about my feelings. Tears welled in her hazel eyes, her hands clasped tightly, a perfect performance. But Ethan saw through it. He'd seen that act before. When she'd crashed his truck and blamed the rain, when she'd maxed out their credit card and claimed it was for Caleb's school supplies, when it was Ethan's turn, he stood tall, his voice steady. I loved Lauren with everything I had. I worked hard. I stayed faithful. I tried to hold us together, but she didn't just leave. She brought another man and his kids into our home, introduced them to Caleb like we were replaceable, then violated court orders by trying to take him from school. This isn't about me, it's about Caleb, and all he wants is to feel safe." The courtroom was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. 3 days later, the judge's ruling came. Primary custody granted to Ethan. Lauren's visitation restricted to supervised sessions every other month, with a mandatory therapy evaluation for Caleb's emotional well-being. Any further violations would result in a complete suspension of her rights. Lauren's face crumpled, not with sadness but with rage, her hazel eyes glaring at Ethan as if he'd orchestrated some grand conspiracy. Outside the courthouse, she cornered him in the parking lot, her voice a low hiss. "You think you've won? You've turned my son against me, but this isn't over." Ethan met her gaze, his grey eyes unflinching. "You turned Caleb against you when you chose yourself over him. I just gave him the safety you couldn't." He turned and walked to his car, the coastal wind whipping at his coat as he drove away. A weight lifted from his shoulders. He'd fought for Caleb, and he'd won. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, Ethan felt free. The morning sun rose over Cannon Beach, its golden rays glinting off the calm waves of the Pacific, the sand cool and damp underfoot as Ethan and Caleb walked along the shoreline near Haystack Rock. It was a crisp December day, the air tinged with the briny scent of the ocean and the faint sweetness of driftwood. Ethan's dark brown hair was tucked under a beanie, his grey eyes softer than they'd been in months, a navy jacket zipped up against the chill. Caleb walked beside him, his curly brown hair ruffled by the breeze, a striped scarf wrapped loosely around his neck, a small bucket in hand as he collected smooth pebbles and bits of sea glass. The past 2 months since the court ruling had been a slow healing, a quiet rebuilding of their lives. Lauren's presence had faded, her supervised visits sparse and strained, her calls and texts dwindling to nothing after Ethan blocked her number. Caleb no longer flinched at the sound of the doorbell, his laughter returning in small bursts. His sketches now filled with bright colors, waves, birds, the jagged outline of the rock they now stood near. Ethan watched his son kneel to pick up a piece of green sea glass, the sunlight catching it like a tiny emerald. "This one's perfect," Caleb said, his grey eyes bright with a joy Ethan hadn't seen in a long time. "We can put it in the shadow box you made." Ethan smiled, the memory of crafting that shadow box with Caleb during a rainy weekend warming his chest. "It'll look great." With the others, they continued walking, the rhythm of the waves a soothing backdrop. Caleb spoke up, his voice thoughtful. "I used to think I'd miss her forever. Mom, I mean, but I don't. Not anymore." Ethan stopped, turning to face his son, the honesty in Caleb's words a bittersweet ache. "It's okay to miss the good parts," Ethan said gently. "But you don't have to hold on to the pain. She made her choices and we've made ours." Caleb nodded, tossing a pebble into the surf. "I like our choices better." The simplicity of the statement struck Ethan deeply, a testament to the resilience of his son. They reached a spot where the beach stretched wide, the sand dotted with small tide pools. Ethan pulled out a small kite from his backpack, a bright blue one they'd bought at a local shop the week before. "Ready to fly this?" he asked, a grin tugging at his lips. Caleb's face lit up. "Yeah." They ran across the sand, the kite lifting into the sky with a gust of wind, its blue tail dancing against the pale winter sky. Caleb laughed as he held the string, the sound pure and unburdened. Ethan stood back, watching, his heart full. The kite soared higher, a symbol of their new beginning. Later that afternoon, they sat on a blanket near the tide pools, sharing a thermos of hot cocoa, the warmth of the drink a comfort against the chilly air. Caleb pulled out his sketchbook, flipping to a page he'd been working on, a drawing of the two of them on this very beach, Ethan holding the kite string, Caleb running ahead, the rock towering in the background. "I want to remember this," Caleb said softly, his grey eyes meeting Ethan's. "Not the bad stuff, just this." Ethan ruffled his son's hair, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll have a lot more days like this, I promise." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the sand, Ethan felt a deep peace settle over him. Lauren thought she'd break them by bringing Derek into their lives, by tearing their family apart. But instead she'd given them something she never intended, a chance to rebuild, to find joy in the small moments, to learn what real love looked like, steady and unwavering. He looked out at the ocean, the waves rolling in endlessly, and knew they were stronger than ever, Not because they'd survived the storm, but because they'd learned to thrive in its aftermath. Ethan took Caleb's hand, and together they walked back toward the parking lot. The kite tucked under Ethan's arm, the bucket of sea glass swinging in Caleb's grip, their footprints in the sand a quiet testament to their new chapter, one built on trust, love, and the promise of brighter days ahead.